we've just said there, we've come up with a little player retention toolkit. So this can be used by coaches and by players themselves, because there's advice in here for players too, to try and create the environment that you've all been talking about, in terms of an environment where players feel listened to, they feel safe to voice an opinion, and where you can actually try and get an opinion out of them to try and shape what you're trying to do. So there's kind of three ways we'll go through it. So the first part of it is how to create a positive coaching environment. So just how your general club and coaching environment is for your sessions, how to create confident, resilient players within this session. And then we'll look at the players themselves, how to actually engage with the player, how you as a coach can engage with the players, or players can engage with other players to keep them nice and positive and promote self-improvement in that way. So the first thing we're going to look at is it just emphasizes what we've done the last time. So this was research done from 20,000 young people aged between 12 and 14 in America, and they asked two simple questions: why do children and young people participate in sport? And the second question was, why do they stop playing sport? And the reasons just are echoed by exactly everything that Aideen has said there. The reasons this was the top 5 reasons why they got involved. Fun was number 1 by a country mile. Just to be clear on that, winning was 10th on that list of things. So winning didn't come anywhere near the conversation. Be fit, part of a team, the challenge, all that sort of stuff. And why they dropped out, the top 3 by a mile was pressure to win and pressure to train. So as Síle exactly said, the pressure just became too much. The coaches or the club just lost sight of what the players wanted to play for. So that's important just in terms of context for everything else we have. So we move on after that. So now we know why the young players especially want to play for fun, and they want to play because they enjoy it. It's how do you as a coach marry that? Because obviously people play to win, and coaches do want to win. No one particularly goes out to lose. But the idea being that you can redefine winning. So you can redefine what winning is and what's being asked of your players to do that. So there's kind of 2 ways you look at it. So you're looking at so striving to win is how you would phrase it properly. So it's learning to compete effectively, and then wanting to win, not at all costs, but through concerted effort. And it's the effort that is the main thing we'll focus on. So effort is something you can control as a person, yourself. You can control your own effort. It doesn't matter what's going on throughout the rest of the session, the game, whatever it is. You control your own effort. Off the back of that, good things will happen if you keep on putting the effort in, but you can control that. And then if you look at also using the effort to teach life skills to people, you look at the things that are involved in a team. You can learn leadership, teamwork, persistence, handling adversity, so dealing with setbacks and overcoming them. These are all very important things for young people to learn especially, and you can learn them all through sports if it's applied properly in the right context. So if we move on to that one, just a wee overview of the role of the coach. Now, there's a few things on here, but the first one and the last one are the most important. So if you ensure participants have fun, and then if everything else kind of kicks on from that, your success as a coach will be measured by whether or not they return to your sessions. So as player retention, if they come back, you're generally doing a good job. Now, sometimes it's not always your fault they don't come back. Sometimes there's things out with your control, but generally, as a coach, if your sessions are fun and they enjoy what they're doing, they will, more than likely or not, they will come back. So that's just a thing to keep in the mind of a coach. That's your main role. Everything else off the back of that is secondary. So we kind of linked in with the give respect, get respect code of conduct that we have, and we came up with the acronym ROOTS for how you would look at the respect aspect. So in terms of creating a positive coaching environment, you're looking for respect for everything. If respect is there for everybody involved, generally good things will happen. It'll be a better place to be. So if your coaches, especially coaches and players, so it's not just the players that have to do this, it's the coaches. So if the coaches are respecting the rules and their opponents, officials, teammates, and themselves, if these things are all met, generally good things will happen. But it can't just be the players being nice to the referees and then the coaches shouting and bawling at them. It's got to be a joined up approach for that. So that's and it just links into that get respect. If the respect is there, everything else comes off the back of that. So a couple of examples that will or tools that we can use for that if we move on. So yeah, these are just a couple of ways you can use to do it. First one is actually teaching and discussing it. So you have to actually talk to your young players about what respect is and what it means and how it's going to be in your session. So if you're going to say, for example, we're going to make a policy of not shouting at referees, or not getting upset, or we're not going to shout at our own teammates. That's just two things that I've seen happen before, where they made a rule, hard and fast rule, and if that rule was broken, then the player sat out or there was a consequence for that. But it's just important to talk to the young people, especially because once they know how it's going to be, then hopefully they should carry on and keep on doing it. A culture keeper can help with that atmosphere. So you as a coach sometimes cannot see everything that's going on, and you can't control everything. It's a big pitch, things happen, you can't hear and see everything. So you can have a young player, so it can be your captain, it could be another person, so someone separate from the captain, it could be another coach, it could be a parent. And in terms of the COVID stuff, it could be a player that doesn't want to come back to training but is just around, and they're in charge of that aspect, being the culture keeper. So they can be making sure that the values and the respect and the environment is being upheld in everything. Players interact with each other and everybody else. So that's something you can do quite easily. And especially if parents are involved with that, again, it just gets them involved and makes them buy into what you're trying to do to that. So that's something to give you a help as a coach. Next couple we move on to, it's what they call teachable moments. So there'll be times in a session where things will happen, either good or bad, and it's very important to focus on them when they happen. So if you see somebody doing a good thing, you see somebody praising a teammate or helping them up, or getting their water bottle for them, or something along those lines, it's good to point that out and emphasize that's what you want to see. Same with a slightly negative aspect. If you see some bad behaviour, say spitting or some swearing or something, or even a parent misbehaving on the sidelines, it's important to call the players round and explain that's not acceptable, because the longer you leave it, the worse, the harder it's going to be, and we touch on that a bit later. Parents' evenings can help that especially. I find parents sometimes can be disconnected because they don't know what's going on. They'll just look at a session and have no idea why something's changed or what they're doing, and they might have the wrong idea about what you're trying to do. So if you have a parents meeting at the start of the season, or even better, a workshop where you can explain the behaviour and the cultural expectations, that can just make a massive step towards parents being involved. And if they're involved, then they're more likely to be on side with what you're doing to help you out. The last two we've got would be, and these are kind of nipping things in the bud, as some we kind of focused on last time. So it's being aware that the longer you leave something and let it fester, the harder it'll be to deal with. This one's a very difficult one because it takes a bit of courage and self-confidence as a coach to go and do that. Some people just don't like confrontation, and that's just the way it is. So this is a very difficult one, but if you are seeing problems, you have to stop them sooner rather than later, because they will grow into something that's very difficult to stop once they start happening. And then the last one is something for your players. So self-control routines can be very useful in terms of players controlling their temper when they're angry or frustrated. It happens in sport, it's always going to happen. But how often as coaches do you actually talk to your players and say, it's okay if you get angry, it's natural, but there are ways you can control it for the good of the team and to link into the respect aspect that we do. So little things like they can count to 10, they can take a few deep breaths, they can clench their fists a few times, they can walk away in a certain direction and come back. Just little things like that can just keep it in their head that there are ways they can control themselves for the betterment of the environment you're trying to create. So that's just a few examples of things you can use as a coach to try and set the right environment within that. Next part we go on to is the actual players themselves. So you've focused on the environment, now you look at the actual players themselves. So how to create a confident and resilient player. So when we look at what is winning, so winning in the dictionary, this is the actual dictionary definition comes up, and you can see it on the screen there, but the key word of that is effort. For us, it's effort. Effort is the thing in that, the one thing in that definition you yourself can control is the effort. A lot of times winning, you can't control the opposition as one player, you can't control the opposition, the pitch, the surroundings, coaches' decisions, your teammates' decisions. You physically cannot control that a lot of the time, but you can control your own effort. So that's what you really want to focus on with that when creating a confident, resilient player. So we move on to the next part. So in terms of what you want them to focus on, we call this kind of scoreboard versus mastery culture. So if you as a coach or a club are just focused on winning, you're just focusing on the scoreboard, the player themselves is not in control of that. So me as a single athlete on a team of 15 players, there's basically 29 other players on that pitch plus coaches and everything else that can affect the scoreboard. Whereas myself, I have very little control over that. So if you start going down that road, all you're doing is comparing yourself to the other team. We're not good enough because we haven't scored enough. I've not played as well as her, etc., etc. Mistakes become acceptable, and you compare yourself with others. It just leads to a bit of anxiety, your self-confidence going down, you're not in control. The way you want to look at it is what we call mastery. So mastery means you focus on the effort and the learning from your mistakes. So mistakes are always going to happen as long as you learn from them. You put the effort in, you learn from mistakes. Off the back of those two things, then your confidence will start to increase. As that happens, your self-confidence goes up, and as everybody knows, the more confident you are, the better you generally tend to do, or you tend to feel in terms of doing that. So it's important to look at it. The athlete is in control of their own effort and their own learning. They're not in control of the scoreboard a lot of the time. And that again links on to the mindset of that. So we're looking to create a confident, resilient player. We want them to have a growth mindset in comparison to a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset means that you look at yourself as somebody that can grow and stretch. So you're looking at saying, if I keep training hard, if I keep working on my skills, if I keep putting the effort in, if I keep turning up regularly, I'm going to get better. And I can have a goal in mind and you'll eventually get there. You might not get there quickly, but you will eventually get there. Whereas the fixed mindset will look at somebody and go, I'm not as good as her, I'm not as big as her, I'm not as fast as her, I'm never going to be that good, and that's me, I am where I am, and I can't get any better. What's the point in putting the effort in? I'm never going to be that good. They feel like their abilities are fixed. So really you want to work on that growth mindset. They can be as good as they want to be as long as they keep on putting the effort in to that. And so then after we look at those three things, here are a couple of tools you can use to kind of get them to focus on that effort part of it. So really everything is involved in the effort. You put the effort in, you will get better. So the effort and the stretch goals are just a little tool you can use as an actual coach yourself. So the outcome, so if we focus on golf, for example, an outcome goal for golf is to drive the ball into the fairway. Whereas the effort involved in doing that would be to focus on your setup, so your grip, your stance, where you're aiming for, and then your actual smooth swing of the ball. So if you get 9 times out of 10, if you get the effort right, the outcome will take care of itself and be more positive. Not all the time, but more often than not, it will. Whereas if you're just focusing on, I must drive the ball into the fairway, you forget the effort that goes before that, and it's the outcome's not always certain. So you're always trying to get them to focus on the effort because that's the thing they can control when you're doing that. You can then stretch them by, once they've achieved that first part of it, you just stretch it a little bit. So you're just challenging them all the time. If you make the goal, if you stretch it too far and make the goal unachievable, again, they won't be able to achieve the goal you've set. Self-confidence gets chipped away at and they just start a wee downward spiral. So you're always looking to try and make the effort realistic, but make sure they can constantly achieve to get where you want them to go. It's almost just breaking it down into little bite-sized chunks. When they do put that effort in, though, it's very important that you reward the effort. So you have to notice if you're going to ask for the effort, you've got to acknowledge when that effort has been put in. Because if you're asking for it and you don't acknowledge that it's happened, they just might think they're doing it wrong, or they might just think, what's the point? There's no point in me doing it. I'm not getting any reward off it. So it's very important that you emphasize that when they do it. Next two we go through, dealing with mistakes is an important thing. So it's important for us as a coach to understand why mistakes are made, because sometimes this can be misconstrued and it can lead to a little bit of conflict between players and coaches if you don't understand why mistakes been made. So the first one is that the athlete or the team doesn't understand what you've asked them to do. So you've asked them to do something and they just blatantly don't have a clue what you're talking about. You've all seen it before. It's just a mess. So that's not their fault. That's more your fault. They understand what you've asked them to do, but they've chose not to do it. Now that for you, that's the player's fault. So as a coach, that's a very difficult one to resolve because you've told them what to do. They understand it. They're just choosing point blank and refusing to do it. Now that's a very, very difficult situation. I don't envy anybody in that situation. Then the last two are kind of fairly similar. So they understand what they've asked of you or what you've asked of them, but they're either in the early stages of learning and they can't do it, or they're physically unable to achieve it. So you've asked them to physically do something with their body that they cannot do, or you've asked them, you've confused them. You've basically confused their brain and made it too complicated and made too many things in there, and they just don't know what's going on. So that's why it's important for you as a coach to know which one of those 4 reasons are why they're making a mistake, so you can change it to do that. And then, but if they are making mistakes, it's very simple to give them a couple of little things to look after that. So If you give them a mistake ritual that the players can use, they can just reset themselves and then focus on what you want. So you're looking at flushing. They pretend to flush it down the toilet, made a mistake, flush it away, and it's gone. We forget about it, they move on. The no sweat, so they wipe their brow or wipe their arm, right? That's it. The mistake's gone away. I've wiped it away. It's gone. Parking. So I think of just in a car, put the parking brake on, that mistake stays there. I'm going to move on somewhere else. And it just, again, just helps them reset and stops them dwelling on it. Because you've all seen, if they start dwelling on mistakes, it's very likely that it's not a positive outcome in the end of it. So that's just a couple of things you can do with the players. For you as a coach as well, you've got an effort log. So this, again, is very relevant for players that are not coming back due to COVID. You can give a player one of these effort logs, and they can be having a look at training and see who's putting in a shift. So you've got a couple of things there. So they get points for attendance, for effort, for behaviour, for attitude, for getting the water for somebody, for encouraging their teammates, for teamwork. None of these are kind of outcome goals. So none of them are results or scoring goals or anything performance based. They're all about effort. So somebody who's not coming back from COVID, or an injured player, for example, can do this as well. And then you use this how, if a player thinks they've had a bad session and they're a little bit down in the dumps, you can show them this at the end and say, well, look, you actually scored very highly on the effort chart today. And that just might make them feel a bit better about themselves. And again, the other thing to look at is if they put the effort in, generally the outcome will eventually come that you're looking for. If the effort's not there, it's never going to happen. And then the last thing is just as a coach yourself, you can put this effort into your session plan. So you've got your coach's outcomes on the left, and then so that's what you want to see, and then the effort goals are in the middle there. So the effort goal should always be hit, and then at least if they're hit, it gives you something a positive to take away from the session. Even if the outcome doesn't happen, as long as the effort is hit, you've got a win for the session at least. Okay, so the last part of that, so that's again little tools you can use with the players. To try and make them resilient and try and keep them nice and positive. The last part of it we're looking at is how to engage the players themselves and promote self-improvement. So you're talking about their mentality, and you're always looking to be positive and to keep them confident. So when you look at the player that's on the slideshow there, she's not very confident. She's obviously had something bad has happened to her there. Her emotional tank, we call it, her emotional tank will be drained. Now, there's many reasons this could be. It could be because of criticism. Someone could have just ignored her and she's not been praised at all. Someone could have been using negative body language. Sarcasm is a strange one because some people think it's funny, but some players just don't respond very well to that at all. She could have been taken off and nobody spoke to her. She could have just had a very, very bad game. So it doesn't always have to be the coach's fault. Sometimes this player has just had a bad game. The key is that at the moment there's no one around her. So now how do you as a coach build that player back up? Because in the moment she's not much use. Whereas you want to get to the other stage where you're filling the emotional tank. So if you have a player in that situation, there's a couple of tools you can use to try and build them up to get them in a better place. So at the moment there you can see both coach and player are having a bit of fun. They're laughing and joking. Little things you can do as a coach to try and make players more confident. Praise truthfully and specifically. So if you're going to give praise, it has to be when it's merited, because then it has more meaning. If you just keep saying, well done, well done, well done, and they're making mistake after mistake after mistake, it loses the impact. So if you only say it when it means it, when they do get it, it means a lot more to them, and it can build somebody up. Listening. So from talking to Síle, if you actually listen to players, they feel a lot more appreciated, and they will give you the answers a lot of the time. But if you're listening and showing appreciation for players, it means that you've created an environment where they feel safe and they feel encouraged to speak and voice their opinions, which is excellent as a coach. That's exactly what you're trying to do as a coach. And positive body language, it can be as simple as smiling, having your hands kind of open, laughing, joking, that sort of thing. Just makes your demeanor as a coach makes a massive impact on the players. So moving on from that one, and these are just the tools that you'll use. So last little bit, a buddy system. So that can be where you have a more experienced player with a younger player, or a more confident player with a slightly less confident player, or a player that's had a bad day or a bad session. Put them with someone you know will cheer them up, and it's just a nice way for them to. You don't have to do anything as a coach. It's just they're automatically built back up by being with somebody positive. Fun activities. If something bad's happened in the session and the players are a bit down, you can see the concentration going, or they've had a bad game previously and they come to training, they're a bit down in the dumps. A fun activity can be really good to try and lift the mood. So dodgeball, rounders, TIG, all these games are brilliant. It doesn't always have to be a strict coaching session. There's nothing wrong with throwing a game in there just for a bit of fun. Automatically they start smiling, and your skills session will be better after that. Then we've got the magic ratio. So it links into giving constructive criticism. You have to give criticism when it's merited. So there's ways and means of doing it. If you're going to give, so criticism is the way they're going to, they'll only learn if you tell them what they're doing wrong. But the idea is you want to give them at least a kind of 5 to 1 ratio is what they look at. So 5 positive things to 1 negative thing. It sounds like quite a lot, but it can only just be a couple of things, body language. So smiling, winking, giving a thumbs up, a high five. That's 4 things straight away you've done that are positive without saying a word to them. So this is what you were doing. This is what I want to see, but this was also really good. So it's just little ways of doing that. And if you are going to give criticism, here's just a couple of ways that you can do it, or a couple of considerations when you are giving criticism. If you move on to the next slide. You avoid, so what they call avoid non-teachable moments. That just means find the best time to give feedback. So after the match or after the moment, straight after the moment is probably not the best time a lot of the time. Emotions are high. People don't really respond very well when they're kind of fired up. So it might be you might have to let them cool down, maybe do it the next session, the next day. In private, some people accept criticism better in private than in front of their team. And it can be more, sometimes they're more honest as well. They're a bit more honest with you if it's just themselves. No one really likes being called out in front of a team that I've ever met. Asking permission sounds a strange one, but if you ask a player, oh, do you mind if I just give you a little bit of constructive feedback, and they say yes, they're giving you permission, which means they're automatically going to be more open to what you're saying. Sometimes they might not want it, and they might not want to hear it. But if you ask the question, you'll find that out. And if they say yes, it just sets a much more positive scene, and the outcome will be a little bit better when they do that. And if and then statements. So that's the way you actually talk to them. So as a coach, you're telling them, if you do this correction that I'm telling you, then this positive outcome will happen off the back of it. So you're giving them context to why you're not just saying that was rubbish, that was rubbish, that was rubbish. You're saying if you do this, this will be better, which helps them understand what you're trying to say. Right. So in terms of the toolkit, that's everything that we had for you there. Hopefully you'll find some useful tips and useful hints that you can use in your sessions. And again, we're happy to answer any questions off the back of anything we've put in here. Aideen, it is now your show.
It is now my show. Thanks so much, Stuart. And I hope through our discussion from all of us, and Síle in particular, that we've provided anyone viewing us with some insight into the ways and means of engaging with young people with the overall intention of keeping them involved. Sorry, I'm losing my microphone. I think you're used to the Zoom stuff now after 25,000 weeks. And especially in referring to what Roberta said, keeping them involved in camogie doesn't necessarily pigeonhole them as a player. They could be that culture keeper that Stuart mentioned. They could be the person like Síle who knows how to engage with other youth members. They could form friendship groups or buddy systems. Like when you break down your club, there's a huge amount of jobs there that young people can fulfill. I suppose, in my own role as a retention coordinator, I have to say that unfortunately for me, it's not a one size fits all. Like, we've all presented huge amounts of information there, valuable information. Some clubs, counties, provinces, national level, might use everything and everything would work. Some counties or clubs or any sort of members would look at it and nothing will suit them. Retention is a very, very unique situation to every club and to every member. So if you do, try to take some of this stuff away and it doesn't come out as you hoped it was, don't be disheartened about it. Keep that in mind, that you have to keep trying something else until you figure out what is suitable for everybody in your environment. So our aim here was to have a lot of this information as a catalyst. So it was for you to be able to start maybe with the tools and the right thought processes to start engaging with young people. The most very important thing is that we try and utilize the potential of young people. listen to their ideas and thoughts, and provide that space for them to achieve those things that they want to achieve. Like we've consistently said, you know, taking that 30 seconds to listen to, you know, the kid that wants to play rounders for 5 minutes. That 5 minutes might mean that your 40-minute session that you would plan for 50 is going to be much more productive than 50 minutes of kids not feeling involved. Even as an adult player myself, in a very latter stage of my playing career, still to this day, girls in adult sessions are asking, can we please play 5 minutes of rounders? You know, so we can't underestimate that, the importance of that. And I think for all the information that we've given here, and again, especially what's been highlighted by Síle, we can give all the information we want, but like Roberta said, and Síle, if we just start to listen to what's been said, and we are in the very lucky position here on this webinar that we do have some young people telling us what exactly to do, basically. So if you stick with us for another 5 minutes, I know it could be close to information overload now, but if you stick with us for another 5 minutes, just sit back. What you're going to hear is voices of our young members who are giving advice on what to do, what they would do if their teammate was considering dropping out, what you as a coach might be able to do, and what you as a club might be able to do. So with that in mind, we would like to thank Stuart for hosting us, to thank Roberta and Síle for taking part, and we really would like to thank you as a member for taking the time to view this webinar. All the resources will be available, so any of the research will be available online, or as Stuart said, you can contact any of us for further information. So start practicing that listening, and take a listen to this to keep a teammate involved.
Make sure they have people to talk to in training. Invite or include them in your friendship group.
Tell them they are good and that you are there to support them.
Encourage teammates to go training and stay involved.
Show them opportunities that exist when you get older and stay involved with the club.
Talk, encourage, be nice, show the fun side.
Practice with them to improve their skills.
Explain that you'll make friends for life through the club.
Don't put pressure on them off the pitch.
Tell them the downsides of quitting, losing friends, becoming unfit, etc.
What might a coach do to keep a player involved?
Make sure they're getting game time. Start in challenge games.
Ask players what they think of training sessions. Take the opportunity to take their opinion into consideration.
Give constructive criticism only. Help by encouraging.
Talk to them about the good aspects of their game and the reasons not to drop out.
Reassure them that they are a valuable player.
Motivate them and try to include them more if they're socially awkward.
Talk about why she or he is considering giving up.
Ensure a good balance of competitiveness versus fun.
Make it feel like being involved is worth something.
Encourage them not to compare themselves to others because everyone is different.
Help them improve their skills.
Be considerate.
What might a club do to keep a player involved?
Try not to exclude anyone. Try some team building activities.
If a club has extra players, they should start a B team in order to give players a better opportunity to get more game time.
Don't discriminate between the boys and girls teams. Provide equal opportunities.
Have a club rule: if you don't go training, you don't get played.
The club needs to tell players how good they are and how they're needed in the club.
Listen to the players, address any problems, and attempt to fix it.
If you're out why players are quitting, talk to them.
Discuss fixtures and training in advance and try to reorganise training to best suit players.
Create more of an open environment for all.
Organise days to introduce new players to the sport.
Get more senior players to talk to younger players.
Have a competitive league and a friendly league.